Well, good afternoon, maybe good morning, maybe good evening, wherever you are in the world. Uh, Thanks for being here. There's over 900 people registered for this, and today's going to be a short one. I'll definitely take some questions at the end, but this is a nice, compact, concise report. I hope you like it. I'll keep trying to make more. Um, we're going to get started officially in 2 minutes to give the stragglers uh, a little extra leeway. And yeah, and then we'll kick things off. So really appreciate y'all being here. Uh, the recording will be available shortly after this. Matthew Bliss says my headphone cable is troubling. Hmm, I'll consider that. James O'Connor, hello from Boston. Hello from Boston. Show the Greyhounds. They uh they will be seen when they choose to be seen. They are napping, as they always do. All right, it's 2 minutes after, so let's go ahead and get started with this. As I mentioned, this is going to be a nice short report today. It's hot. It's hotter than heck here in Boston. I can tell you that. I'm sure it's probably warm wherever you are too. So we're going to keep this one a little bit short. This is part three of what we've been doing with the advertising landscape. First two parts were the first was really about reach, and the second one was about attention and trust, and this is all about driving to action and podcasting's place in that. Um, if you recall, if you've watched any of the other two parts, it's a very large sample that we have basically put together in partnership with our research partners at Signal Hill Insights. There's over 5,000 Americans 18 plus in this sample. And I would also like to acknowledge our sponsors, BetterHelp, NPR, ESPN Podcasts, Media Bodies, American Public Media, and SiriusXM Podcast Network for helping to make this possible and helping to fund these contributions to the space. So, as I mentioned, it's a very large sample, weighted to the U.S. population, weighted to the census, so it is all projectable. And I'm going to start with a couple of slides that I showed actually in the very first webinar of this series, the advertising landscape. But just to sort of create a definition here that we can all work with. Um, in the first webinar, we showed that the monthly usage of ad-supported podcasting was 31% of Americans. And then we went further and asked people to indicate which media platforms, which ad-supported media platforms were the ones that they used the most regularly, absolute daily usage. They picked their top four. We call those prime users. And in this case, that was 23% of the monthly podcast audience indicated that they were basically prime podcast users. They're near daily, if not daily usage, and it's one of their top four ad-supported choices. It's the way that we were able to ask so many questions, which we have been dripping out in a manner that will not kill you, I hope. So everything I'm going to show you from this point on is with those podcast primes. Now, that's a bit of a cheat. I will say that, right? I mean, podcast primes are going to be positive about podcasting. The story was mixed when you looked at the entire sample, but there's enough in here for podcast primes to make this a very very robust sample. And I think what you're going to see here is less about podcasting and it's more about ads and the effectiveness of ads with those podcast primes. What do we need to do as an industry? We need to manufacture more podcast primes. That's probably job one. But let's go ahead and get started here with a look at podcast primes. And we asked a whole bunch of questions about ads, and we've done some of these in the previous reports. Today, I'm going to show you how effective podcast ads are. First question that we asked for podcast primes is describe a recent advertisement that led you to make a purchase. And that advertisement could have been anywhere, right? And these are the general categories that they gave us. I always hate it when other is number one, but there you go. Food and beverages, beauty and personal care, and so on. This is basically uh, an effective recent ad that Podcast Primes had heard or watched, not necessarily on podcasts. Where did they see or hear it? And the answer is podcasts or social media platforms are really tied here, number one and number two. So what the podcast prime audience is telling us then is that these are the top, top 4, 5, 6 ways to reach them. And there is quite a bit of drop off after television there, right? So social media, podcasts, internet, web, radio. This is what they told us, which we basically categorized. So podcast primes did hear or encounter or see ads most likely on social media platforms or on podcasts, right? Um, and in fact, what made that ad effective? Price sensitivity, personal needs and preferences, advertisement influence, visual attraction, quality and effectiveness, a whole mix of things, right? But number one here is price sensitivity. So I think that is absolutely something to keep in mind. We are still, I think, in uh, interesting times may you live in economically. So absolutely, prices and discounts are going to drive ad effectiveness, but not overwhelmingly here. It's actually quite a nice balanced list, right? And then in the next 3 months, we asked Podcast Primes, do you plan to make a purchase or change providers in the following categories? And there is quite a bit of churn here. Uh, Groceries, number one. I hope people buy groceries um, sometime in the next 3 months. But these aren't all necessarily the decision makers or the grocery buyers in the home. But 77% say groceries, another 71% quick service restaurant, entertainment, streaming services, and so on. So they're uh, they're buying, they're absolutely buying, they're planning to buy, and they're planning to make purchases. Now, here's a series of questions that we asked, and I wanted to print all of the ad-supported media types on here just so you could really get the context and the picture, right? So when we asked Podcast Primes a series of actions, have you taken an action in the last 6 months with respect to the ads on each media? First action here is discuss the product with others. Number one here was podcasts with ads, right? 28%, significantly higher than YouTube with ads and premium TV streaming services with ads. Now, again, these are podcast primes. They are predisposed to like podcasts, but A, not necessarily ads. And B, they're getting ads in all of these other ad supported media as well, right? Podcast Prime is not podcast exclusive. So discuss the product with others was certainly very high. The second question we asked is, did you write down a promotional code? And the third said that an ad from a podcast prompted them to write down a promo code. Again, significantly higher than anything else on this list. Next action we asked, did you take a screenshot or a picture? Right now, it could have been a display ad. It could have been a YouTube podcast, for instance, right? This one not as high because there's the dominant modality for podcasting remains audio, but still number one here, 17%, followed by Instagram and YouTube with ads. And you can see some of the other categories had next to nothing in them, right? So, but again, I wanted to kind of print them all. Searched for more information about the brand. 27% again said that they did that as a result of encountering a podcast ad. That's double the next highest on the list here, Instagram. So there's absolutely uh, search behavior happening that is being prompted by podcasts. Visiting the brand's social media was another question that we asked. And again, podcasts with ads prompted 26% of podcast primes to do that, significantly higher than anything else on the list. And of course, where the rubber meets the road, made an immediate purchase. 22% say that a podcast ad prompted them to make an immediate purchase. Again, much higher here than premium TV streaming services or Instagram or YouTube. And again, these may be podcast primes, but they're not podcast exclusive, right? They're not podcast only. They are encountering ads in all of these other platforms. But as we saw in the first couple of studies, the podcast ad is more notable for them. They're paying more attention to it. They're clocking it. They're registering it a little bit more precisely. So yeah, 15 slides. I wanted to leave a little bit of time for questions here because I think they're pretty I think it's pretty good data. I mean, yes, it is again with podcast primes. I'm trying not to, so you would expect podcasting to do well, but it does really well. And again, people are consuming media on all of these other platforms. Um, I'm saying hi to lots of AI assistants. Hello, AI assistants. Anybody have any questions? I'm gonna pop into the Q&A box here. Don't see any open questions. Um, will the deck be posted? Yes, Brad. The deck will be posted very, very shortly when we're finished here, and a recording of this will be available. Any insight into host-read ads versus non-host-read ads? Not in this study. Probably due to refresh a study that we did a couple of years ago called After These Messages, where we did look into that. And, so that's available on our website. And we tested three different treatments of an ad. We tested a ad-libbed host read, we tested a scripted host read, and then we tested a scripted announcer read with the same script. And they finished in that order, but the announcer read ad did not do much worse. So it did go sort of host read ad lib, host read scripted, announcer read scripted, but all three did really really well. So I would encourage you to look at that. Um, it is probably a step too much in a survey like this one to do that kind of work, but I think that's something that we will look into refreshing again in the future. Any data related to an audio ad in the middle of a video podcast? No, we didn't have anything that specific. Doug asks, aside from podcasting being a popular channel, am I seeing Instagram seems to be the natural accompaniment to podcast primes? Instagram and Facebook, there do seem to be, I would say Instagram does seem to be disproportionately higher than I might have expected. But I think that's a shrewd observation, Doug. I think looking at some of those second, third, and fourth and fifth choices as good companions to podcast ads, I think is a smart way to think about it. Neil, how much difference did you see for podcast primes versus all podcast listeners in terms of your top line impressions? The way that we were able to conduct this particular project, we have 22 different ad supported media platforms. We probably asked 40 or 50 questions. If you were to do the math on that, it would be a 60,000 question survey. So the way that we pulled it off basically was by confining the questions to primes, and people were asked to select 4 primes once they indicated their monthly and daily usage. Let's see here. Any anecdotes or statistics on 100% share of voice buys? Also, howdy from the South Shore kid. Thanks, Giles. No, we don't have that in here, unfortunately. Um, any insight on the length of a podcast and how ads perform under 60-minute perform better than over on the length of a podcast? No, not in this particular study. How do we create more pod primes? Asks James O'Connor. That's a really good question. I think we should probably advertise. Um, I don't think we do that enough. I don't think we've still really introduced podcasting in any kind of a mainstream way to the public. Um, but and I think part of it is the cadence of podcasting for many people is a weekly cadence and not a daily cadence. So people might look at Facebook 20 times in a day in little sort of micro vacations, I think was a term that Microsoft used. But that's, building that habit, I think, is something that we still need to do. What about TikTok or LinkedIn? I believe TikTok was pretty far down that list, I think. LinkedIn, I'm not, I don't think we had LinkedIn thrown in there, but we certainly will in the future. Have you found if ad spots that tell a short story on the company's culture, vision, and experience are more effective and engaging than straight up promo ad reads? I mean, I have some anecdotal work on that. I have some brand lift studies that I've done on that. I think people are people are intrigued by variety. That does not mean that they are more effective ads, but people have told us in questions in the past that they appreciate experimentation with the form. Um, but something that specific, I don't think that we have done so. Um, I think that's about all the questions I see there. I believe I answered them. How about that? Uh, I hope you're having a great summer. unless you're in Australia. I hope you're having a terrible winter. No, I'm hoping that you're all lovely and fine. And I once again want to thank our sponsors for making this possible. I want to thank BetterHelp, NPR, ESPN Podcasts, Media Bodies, American Public Media, the SiriusXM Podcast Network, and of course our research partners at Signal Hill Insights for making all of this possible. Landed the plane in under half an hour. And this will all be available on our website very, very shortly. So once again, thank you very much for the gift of your time and attention. Over 900 people signed up for this. And it's really kind of the conclusion of this three-part unpacking of all the data that we've looked at. I hope I will see many of you at Podcast Movement. We'll have a brand new, completely fresh study that we're going to be starting to talk about there. The next edition of the podcast landscape, now in its third year. So how about that? Cheers, everyone. Have a great rest of your day, and hope to see many of you in Dallas next month.